It was time to visit the beautiful town of Peñuelas in the southwest coast of Puerto Rico. It was a rather gloomy day with overcast skies and occasional drizzles. But hey, could a gray and ugly day in an earthquake-stricken town turn out to be interesting and fun? I don't know. Let's find out. Peñuelas was founded on August 25, 1793, in a valley between the towns of Guayanilla to the west, Adjuntas north, and Ponce to the east. Peñuelas is known among Puerto Ricans as El Valle de los Flamboyanes, or the Valley of the Flamboyanes in the King's English, because of the great amount of Royal Poinciana trees that grow in the region. It's also known as La Capital del Güiro because of its great tradition of producing that traditional Puerto Rican musical instrument. Just so you know, that weird ñe phonetical sound that you hear in the word Peñuelas is called an ñ, and it's written with a tilde over the letter N. And in the case of Güiro, those two dots over the letter U are called a diaresis, and they indicate that the word is pronounced Güiro and not Guiro. Both phonetic instances, or phonemes, are actually considered letters in the Spanish language. Hence, the Spanish alphabet actually has 28 letters instead of 26. In fact, when I was a kid back in the 60s, it had 29, but the CH got demoted. As for the Royal Poinciana Trees, they seem to be everywhere in this little town. Back in June of 2023, I had already mentioned Royal Poinciana Trees during our visit to the town of Sidra, and how they were actually brought to Puerto Rico by the English, not by the Spaniards, from the island of Madagascar during the 1700s. This time, I had the opportunity to talk to the director of tourism for the town of Peñuelas, who insisted that the real name of the flamboyant tree was Delonyx regia. Well, guess what? I looked it up, and he was right, and so was I. Huh? Well, as it turns out, they're both the same tree. Delonyx regia and Royal Poinciana are the same thing. So we were both right, but more on that in a minute. As you know, we stayed at the beautiful Guánica 1929 hotel during the filming of the Ponce, Peñuelas, and Guayanillas videos, and we'll be returning for the Adjuntas and Jayuya trips as well. Guánica is a small town about 12 to 13 miles east of Peñuelas as the crow flies. That's an excellent starting place for exploring multiple towns in the area. But more about Guánica 1929 later. Peñuelas was once a small town that made its money in agriculture. But back in the late 60s and throughout the 70s, government officials on the island had the harebrained idea of moving into the petrochemical business, and Peñuelas became home to CORCO, the Caribbean Oil Refining Company. I still recall when I was in my early 20s, and I used to go by with my friends on our way to the beaches at Cabo Rojo. There were parts on State Road number 2 where nothing would grow for miles. The place was a wasteland. The extreme pollution levels led to all sorts of health conditions among the locals, many of which prevail to this day. I mean, it's no accident that Peñuelas has the second highest incidence of breast cancer in Puerto Rico. Fast forward about 50 years and Peñuelas became yet another epicenter, literally, but this time of the telluric kind. Starting on December 28, 2019, Puerto Rico was hit by an earthquake swarm, including 11 that were of magnitude 5 or greater. The largest and most damaging of this sequence was a magnitude 6.4, which occurred on January 7, 2020 at 4:24 in the morning. Puerto Ricans are mostly Catholic, and January 6 is when they celebrate El Día de los Tres Santos Reyes. It's a local holiday celebrated by the faithful and the not so much. In any case, the morning of January 7, most of the people were fast asleep after a day of parties, lots of eating and drinking. Peñuelas and its neighboring town Guayanilla to the west were among the most affected. However, 5 years later, you can hardly tell, at least in Peñuelas. We were expecting cracked buildings everywhere, and the truth is that we didn't see a single one. Maybe they already fixed them, or maybe I looked in the wrong places. But the fact was that the town seemed normal to my wife and I. Another thing that I did notice, and this is something that you'll see all over Puerto Rico, was the lack of patrons in the streets. Just a few elders joking at the town square and a few pedestrians here and there. The place looked deserted, and we were there on a Thursday. Puerto Rico's demographic shift is becoming more and more evident, and the powers that be don't seem too concerned. Or maybe they just don't have a clue on how to fix it. As always, our first stop was at the beautiful San José Parish, originally built in 1793 as a wooden structure and rebuilt in 1929 in its present form. It's a beautiful temple that follows a straightforward design on the outside, but is beautiful and inviting on the inside. The ceilings have a great deal of woodwork and design, while the windows are large and bright. The absence of large stained glass windows and the light-colored, almost white walls make for a bright interior and a temple that seems larger than it actually is. If there's one thing that this temple proves, is that there's beauty and simplicity. This certainly isn't a fancy church. Nonetheless, it's a beautiful one. It was also rebuilt with a great deal of practicality, as I learned later. If you look carefully, you'll notice that the front door points east, which is the opposite of what the Roman Catholic Church would dictate at the time. Well, it wasn't an accident. It was built that way on purpose, so that parishioners leaving Mass in the morning would pour into the adjoining businesses on Commerce Street and boost the local economy. As you leave San José Parish, you'll be standing in the beautiful Peñuelas Public Square, dedicated to Ángel Pacheco Alvarado. Pacheco Alvarado, known among the locals as El Jíbaro de Peñuelas, was a musician, composer, troubadour, guitar, and tiple player. His book about the Puerto Rican tiple is the only one published to date. In case you're wondering, the Puerto Rican tiple is the smallest of Puerto Rico's traditional string instruments. It was derived from Spanish instruments brought to the island during the 16th century. During the second half of the 20th century, it lost its popularity to the prevalent cuatro. However, in recent years, it has been making a comeback. Instead of being west of the parish, the Peñuelas Square actually surrounds the temple on its north, east, and south sides. This makes for a huge area that includes beautiful fountains, which weren't working while we were there, seating area, plenty of trees, and a huge bowl-shaped bandstand for musical and civic events. In all fairness, I later learned that the fountains don't work because of a broken part that has already been ordered, so they'll be back in operation soon. In addition to being huge and beautiful, the square is also clean and free of graffiti, which by now, you must know, is of the utmost importance for me. Across the street, on the northwest corner of the square, there's a small park called Parque del Retiro Peñolano, which I would venture to translate as Peñolano Retirement Park in the King's English. Peñolano is what they call the people from Peñuelas, their moniker, if you will. In any case, there's a black Baldwin steam locomotive known by the locals as La Negra Cocola that used to belong to Central Dolores. Central Dolores was a smaller sugarcane plantation in Peñuelas that used to have its production milled at the nearby Merceditas Central in Ponce. The park is sponsored by the local Lions Club and it's in mint condition. There were 2 more spots that we wanted to visit, and the sky was getting grayer by the minute. One was La Soplaera, a waterfall on the Guayanese River high up in the mountains on the way to the neighboring town of Adjuntas, and the Peñuelas Tourism Office, where we heard there was a beautiful museum. Well, at the risk of learning about an important attraction after returning from the mountains, we decided to visit La Soplaera first before the rain came pouring down. What we did learn, both while visiting La Soplaera and later at the tourism office, is that there's no easy way to reach the falls. It's a strenuous uphill climb with many ways to hurt yourself. In fact, there are signs everywhere with the names of people that have drowned or fallen to their death trying to reach the landmark. So, be advised and do it at your own risk. That said, the map also shows that there are 2 additional falls further upriver, if you're really the adventurous type.
La Soplaera is a waterfall, and the word Soplaera means when the wind blows. And, as you see there, it says beware. Lots of currents here. It's not safe. People have drowned here. So I'm not telling you to come here to swim. I'm telling you that if you are a landscape photographer like me, I just love waterfalls. So I'm here to see the waterfall, not necessarily to swim in it. You have to be in shape to come here too, which I'm not, but at least I try. It's slippery when wet and when it's not wet, because that green stuff on the floor is slippery too. So everything I've told you from the sign up is at your own risk. I hope, I've never been here, that the site is worth it. But as far as swimming here, like the sign says, it's not recommended. Oh my God. My 71 years are heavy. They weigh on me. Not too much water here though. This is it. Over there, it's a different story. Not an easy trek, not for a 71-year-old guy, but I'm here to explore this, and I'm going to explore it. By the way, another thing you have to keep in mind is, like I've been telling you,
Back in town, our final stop was at the tourism office and museum. When we got there, it was pouring cats and dogs, but the tourism director himself, Mr. Iran Rosario, gave us the royal treatment and allowed us to park right at the front door. The Peñuelas Tourism Office and Museum is a gorgeous building that used to be the home of a well-to-do Peñolano. More on that in a minute. We started our conversation with Rosario expressing our surprise at how well the town survived the aforementioned swarm of earthquakes. He was quick to point out several aspects about Peñuelas that are certainly not obvious to the casual visitor.
¿Verdad? Los terremotos lastimosamente y lamentablemente, ¿verdad?, destruyeron nuestros pueblos vecinos de Guánica, de Guayanilla. En Yauco hubo mucha destrucción. En Peñuelas sí hubo destrucción, pero fue más a nivel residencial. Nuestra escuela superior, que es la única, por darte un ejemplo, ¿verdad? También sufrió daños estructurales y hasta el sol de hoy no hemos podido reutilizar esa escuela hasta, ¿verdad?, que venga ese proyecto de reconstrucción de la...
And here's something amazing about the bowl-shaped bandstand at the town square that very few people know.
Actualmente en Puerto Rico solamente quedan 5 pueblos con concha acústica dentro de la plaza pública principal. Lleva el nombre de un artista plástico y pintor reconocido del pueblo, quien obtuvo, ¿verdad?, múltiples galardones a nivel nacional e internacional, quien es Moisés Castillo. Y nuestro icónico flamboyán, que es el que está pintado dentro de esa concha acústica, correcto. Tengo el honor y el privilegio de decir que lo pintó mi tío, pintor y artista plástico Israel Rosario. Ese flamboyán, ¿verdad?, es su segunda edición. El primero se pintó para el 1992. Luego se hicieron unos retoques en el 1998 y hasta el sol de hoy permanece con la misma pintura del 1998. ¿Cuál es la característica adicional, verdad? Siempre tengo un detallito adicional, es que Israel, para pintar ese flamboyán, no utilizó andamios ni escaleras. Él amarró la brocha a un palo de escoba y desde el suelo de la concha, él plasmó el flamboyán.
Can you imagine controlling a painter's brush held to the tip of a stick from the floor? It's hard enough to hold the brush alone in your hand. And the guy still maintained his proportions and his sense of perspective? Amazing! The building housing the Peñuelas Museum used to be the residence of Mr. Luis Maldonado, a wealthy businessman and landowner from town. Back then, the Peñolanos used to call it Castillo Maldonado, or Maldonado Castle in the King's English. Today, its formal name is Casa de la Historia de Peñuelas Ramón Rivera Boñé. But, as you might imagine, Peñolanos still call it Castillo Maldonado. And after more than 100 years, it doesn't look a year old.
Aquí lo único que se cambió fueron las puertas y las ventanas, porque con el tiempo, ¿verdad?, eran de madera, se consumieron por diferentes razones y pues eso es lo único que se cambió.
The first floor of the museum holds itinerating exhibitions by Peñolano artists, while the second floor holds permanent pieces from the museum's extensive collection. There's even a reading room where every book is written by, you guessed it, Peñolano authors. There are many more places to explore in the little town of Peñuelas, like swimming holes, waterfalls, and caves, but they cater more to the local residents than to people from abroad. Rosario also told us about a huge Ceiba that's actually inside a private property on the outskirts of town. By the looks of it, it must be at least a couple of 100 years old. Personally, I've seen larger ones, and I've also posted them on my YouTube channel and blog, but still, I decided to include it in case you're interested. The coordinates on screen will take you straight to it. It was finally time to say goodbye to Peñuelas and head back to the beautiful Guánica 1929 hotel to enjoy the afterglow of a beautiful sunset. And why the afterglow, you might ask? Well, because Guánica Bay points southeast, so the sun will always be to your back in the afternoon. In any case, Guánica 1929 isn't just a gorgeous hotel. It's also just a stone's throw away from the world-famous bioluminescent bay at La Parguera in the neighboring town of Lajas. And even Cabo Rojo, with all its drop-dead beaches, is just 25 miles away as the crow flies. You can reach any of those attractions in under half an hour. By the way, not bad for a day that started drizzly and muggy, right? See you next time.